And here we are live. Another spoiler room. It's been a little while. We've been quite busy here at Special Mark Productions, but we are back with a new episode, and it happens to be a big 4-0 episode. This time, well, it is Halloween season. It's October, so why not talk about a horror film from 1976? And that is Burnt Offerings from director Dan Curtis. And tonight I got a great group of individuals in the spoiler room to help talk about this interesting horror film from that time. First off, in the room, he's back here with us. Cole Meredith is in his house. Hello, Cole.
Hello, Mark. Hello, gang. Thanks for having me.
Glad you can make it here. And next to him is the new Horror Film Fest coordinator, all around great guy, and the only man I know that can pull out a bow tie and pull it off, make it look so stylish. It is the one and only Paul Salzer. Hello, Paul.
Hi, good to be on this show for a long period of my absence.
Yes, we did miss you.
Aww.
And we are glad to have you back tonight, especially to talk about this one. And next to him, it is the spoiler room regular, the man, the myth. You may know him as Baby Spice, but no, he is the man.
No, you would be mistaken.
You'd be mistaken. But what I will say is he is a warehouse of knowledge, and he has forgotten things that I wish I could remember. More things than not. And it's one and only Scotty D. Hello, Scott.
Hello, I'm working on forgetting quite a lot right now, so.
You still have forgotten more than I've ever going to know about movies like this. So I am glad you could join us tonight for Burnt Offerings. Yes, came out in 1976, aptly. October 18th. I didn't plan it like this.
Hey!
We're recording right now on October 19th, so it's almost exactly 40 years to the day Burnt Offerings came out. It's a story that is, well, we've heard it before, but you got to remember when it came out. A family moves into an old haunted house that regenerates itself by feeding off the life force of its injured occupants. And yes, that is pretty much a good assessment of this film. So let's start. We're going to go the opposite way here. Scotty D, let's start with you. Your initial thought with Burnt Offerings when you first watched it.
You know, well, this is a movie I've heard about since I was a kid. I think I don't know if my brother and my mother or whatever went to go see the movie when it came out or whatever. You remember it was PG because there was no PG-13, and you could get away with a lot more back then. So it was a PG-rated movie, and I always heard like whispers, "Oh, it's really good," and then from my friends, like over the last 4 decades, I've been hearing, "Oh, it's really good." For some reason, I've just never gotten around to it. I've always had it around. I've never actually gotten around to watching it, and I knew I was going to see it this year anyway because of this episode, and I couldn't remember when this episode was. I'll confess, I didn't know it was coming up. But I said, you know what, I got to see it. And so during the 31 Days of Horror in October, I said, okay, I'm going to finally plug this sucker in. And yeah, it's a good movie. I mean, it had some of the feelings that I was kind of expecting it to have given its pedigree.
Sure.
It's a really creepy movie with some really stunning things, and I'm really surprised by how well paced the movie is because it's almost 2 hours long, and I thought that might be a bit long for a movie like this, but no, it's really well paced, and would probably be a great movie. I mean, amazingly incredible movie if it had somebody, say, maybe a little more artsy, fartsy, and a little more subtle behind the camera than Dan Curtis, who's Dan Curtis is a fine filmmaker and responsible for a number of good films, a lot of good TV. But he kind of did bring a little bit of that TV sensibility. Everything is punctuated by the dum 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 on the soundtrack and everything. Aside from that, though, yeah, this is a really creepy, very psychological horror film, and I thought it was it offered a lot of really, really it's not it looks like it's going to be your typical haunted house movie, and it adds a really different spin on the whole haunted house thing.
Yeah, I dug it too, and this was the first time I watched it as well. It was one of those where I heard about it, and I watched it, and it surprised me actually. I'm like, this is actually rolling around pretty good. Paul, how about you? I know this is your exact type of horror.
It definitely is.
So, how did you your initial thoughts with Burnt Offerings?
I'm going to start out by saying I was surprised that it wasn't about burnt ends and barbecuing, first of all. It does move a lot slower than modern films, and this definitely is the type of movie I like. I like the supernatural horror movies. I like the ones that just give you the sense of dread as you're going through it, and you're left afterwards with, ooh, that kind of feeling. I love those type of horror films. I think the strongest asset about this film is that we as an audience know way more than the characters in the film do. Because we know what's happening to them, we know what's going to happen to them, and it doesn't matter because it's just like, oh, it happened, yes. And it's all punctuated by that wonderful soundtrack, because that soundtrack just leads you in. It clues you in. That's something's gonna happen. Something's gonna happen. Oh, there it comes. And it's not jump scares, which I really enjoy the fact that it wasn't all jump.
Oh, definitely, and it shows. I love I'm glad you mentioned the music, because to me, that's the old school scare. You've just got a room that you're panning through, and then you've got the creepy music in the background, and you're just like, oh man, some shit's gonna go down somewhere. You know it's coming, but all it is a shot of a room, and then they just focus in on a picture, and you're like, why is the picture there? Holy crap, creepy music. Something's going to happen related to that picture. But nothing's happening in the frame. I mean, it's just a zoom in on a picture. So I dig that old school type of method. And yeah, you're right. It really added to the atmosphere and helped with the feeling when there really wasn't anything visually happening in the frame. Cole, how about you? How about you in Burnt Offerings?
I liked it a lot, man. It was way better than I thought it was going to be. I didn't know that much about it. And there's the, the obligatory Amityville horror-esque setup, although I think this was before that. But, of course,
3 years before Amityville.
3 years prior. Yeah, but it always seems like in these movies, the husband checks out the house, and it's a deal that's way too good to be true. And the wife is like, no, we've got to stay. And so I thought I knew right away where it was going, and it very subtly and gradually morphed into kind of like Christine with a house, and again, this is before Christine, but I really liked that aspect of it. Like Paul, I mean, this is my type of movie. I like movies that push 2 hours and use long, steady, brooding shots, and lots of emphasis on close-ups and reactions as opposed to squirting blood, which I like as well. But I really enjoy this type of movie, and there are bloody moments, but the movie savors them. If there was any blood before the guy hit the windshield and his face went right through it, that wouldn't have the impact, So I liked that about it. The most important element of this movie, though, aside from Karen Black, obviously, and Oliver Reed, obviously, who did fantastic. It's very rare you get to see the male character break completely down in a horror movie. And he was pretty close to tears at the end there. The very last shot, the Psycho-esque shot where he's approaching her. I like how he was just about ready to just completely crumble. But the house is the most important character in the movie, and I think the movie succeeds because the director, and I don't know much of any of his other work, to be honest, but he really treats the house as a character. He uses a lot of repetitive shots of the same areas, so you become familiar with the house. It becomes a character. You know where you're at spatially with what's happening, and you never lose sight of sort of the spatial dynamics of the piece, which is absolutely essential in a movie like this, especially when there's essentially no ghosts, really. It's like Karen Black is being possessed, right? So Yeah, all those elements plus the elements that Scott and Paul and yourself mentioned, I just make a really great movie, and of course the score and the completely dark ending, which doesn't wimp out at all. I'm very surprised you guys said this is PG. It's like, wow, yeah, I guess it could be.
Yeah, today, just the effectiveness of a movie. I mean, we've heard of that. I can't think of the examples right now, but we've heard those reports of that. Oh, this film was rated R. Why? Terror. It was like too scary. It was considered too scary. Like, well, that shouldn't matter. That just means the film's doing its job, in a rating or something. And it used to not matter. So I mean, you could very well, as a kid in the 70s, I imagine, go see a PG-rated movie and come out of it and have nightmares for weeks, and it didn't matter, it didn't, just because something was PG, it meant parental guidance. It meant, parents, take a look at this before you just send your kid out the door. But, we're not going to put an age restriction on it, but it's up to you. And that's what it meant. And so, yeah, lots of kids did come back and have nightmares for weeks. And you know what? That happens. Deal with it.
That's really a bad thing. Yeah, this cast, Cole mentioned it already. This cast is just crazy. Karen Black does fantastic in here.
In one of the horror films that she apparently never made.
Yeah.
Because Karen Black, when I say something like that, I wanted to say this. Karen Black would especially later on in her career. Now, she had credits that went across all genres. She was in 5 Easy Pieces and, Airport 75 and, lots of other things, over the years, that were not horror. But she would constantly get asked about films like this, Tales of Terror, and some of the later films. And to the end of her life, she swore she never made a horror film. She swore she never ever would ever lower herself to make a horror film. And I'm like, she made a lot of horror films. She would always kind of placate it by saying, no, I made terror films.
Okay.
I'm like,
sure.
Karen, yeah, you made horror films. You made some bad horror films, and you made some really good horror films. Own it. She never did. So this is one of the best of the films that she never made.
Just like those actresses that say, I don't make softcore films, I make art pictures. Okay, honey, now take it off. But we don't get them for a long time, but you also get Burgess Meredith in here and Eileen Heckart as the brother and sister who rent the house out to the Rolfs, played by Karen Black, Oliver Reed, and Lee Montgomery. I loved seeing Burgess Meredith in this. I thought he plays the crazy so well.
Well, he was everywhere in the 70s. I think I don't know if it predated Rocky or not, or if Rocky was where he kind of got that resurgence, but from a certain point in the 70s onward, you could see this guy was just in everything. He'd show up in this, Foul Play. There'd be other scary films in there. He was in a film where he played a villain against Jodan Baker. For God's sake, I mean, Burgess Meredith was just one of those ubiquitous 70s actors, and he was a good actor. No, not saying talking any smack about Burgess here.
No, he got steady work, and I really loved his brother character, and he exudes that creepiness that you want, especially for a film like this. So let's talk about the couple of the characters in here. Of course, we've mentioned Karen Black and Reed, who are playing husband and wife, and Paul. Did you get the feeling? I know it's the sign of the times, though. Did you get the feeling though that here we have yet another movie where the woman is going crazy and the husband is going crazy because of her? Did you get that vibe from this?
A little bit like that, but I actually enjoyed that because I'm used to reading Stephen King stories, and it's always about the father going nuts, and And so it was kind of nice for me to like, oh, it's not going to be the father this time. It's going to be the wife. Yes.
But I mean, it does fall into that time though, where it's still along the lines of the women are the fall of man type of thing, So I'm watching this going, yeah, okay, we've kind of got that theme in here overall. I mean, she's going crazy about taking care of the house, which I'm sitting here going, wow, she's really not a modern woman here.
But
she may have been before the opening of the credits. We don't know that,
That's true.
And they needed her to be the one, because otherwise the dynamic of the story would change because of that ending, that Psycho type ending, the reveal,
the big reveal, which you kind of see it going that way. I mean, you never get to see the mom she's supposed to be taking care of, in here. And Cole, what about you? What'd you think of the Marion Rolfe character? Did you get the feeling that it gave the tune of women are evil?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I said it like right off. She's the guy's like, let's get the hell out of here. There's a catch, and she's like, there's no catch. And Burgess Meredith is like, there's no catch. Oh yeah, but wait, there's this creepy woman in the attic. You got to go look after. But I think it does set up her descent, if you want to call it that, or ascent, depending on how you view the film. Really, it sets it up in the first shot. She's looking out the window and she says, "Oh, lovely," just gazing out at the trees, not the mansion, of course, but certainly her attention isn't on her family. So I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I kind of always try to look for stuff like that. Are the filmmakers giving the audience that extra jab? And I think they set up her character well, but I totally agree with you, Mark. I mean, it may be a sign of the times, but I definitely got that. Although there were a couple cool moments where I thought maybe he's batshit crazy, simply because I didn't know anything about the film. Like when the house is reconstructing itself and he tries to wake up his son, get his son out the door, and there's a storm outside. There was part of me that thought, well, maybe they might tip this the other way. Because it was storming, so you could read it both ways, and it toys with that a little bit. Like, is he really just a kind of an aggressive horn dog, or is there something wrong with her? With the pool scene, which does get a little aggro, you gotta admit. It's like, well, chill out, dude, Christ. But I totally agree with you, Mark. I do.
Yeah. But at the you do put a good point. They do start, and it's like a half hour in, where both the husband and the wife kind of flake out the first time, because the husband is swimming with the son, and he's starting to try to drown him. And I'm like, holy crap, and the house starts locking her out, and I'm just like,
yeah.
But they come back to that whole drowning scene later on, and that actually they flip that whole scene on its end, where the mother, who's being possessed up to this point, suddenly changes. She actually becomes more heroic at that point. She even saves the son at that point, and I thought that was a really good kind of a we start out with this one scene, and then later on we use that scene again. Only we flip it.
Good point.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's those maternal instincts that were kicking in at that point, again, to go with kind of more traditional roles. But really, it's the paternal instincts that kind of try to, it almost makes it, and I guess you can, Cole really nailed this a few minutes ago when he called this Christine with a house. I mean, I'm looking at him like, oh my God, yeah, it's all there. Everything is there. That is perfect. But,
Thanks, man.
but yeah, I mean, like, it's almost can be seen as, a lot. Yeah, I'm sure this was not even intentional, but in the 70s was when there's like a lot of cocaine was really happening in Hollywood. You were hearing a lot about suddenly it wasn't so much of a shameful thing for people to go to AA. You kind of got like this thing about like it's almost like a thing about addiction, a parallel of a metaphor for addiction. Will the love and my devotion to my family and to my children will that save us? Can that alone save me from addiction?
Mhm.
And it's the mother getting possessed by the house, and then the father is towards the beginning too. The whole sensation of being out of the city, you kind of got that they had lived in the city, and because who the hell else vacations in the middle of freaking nowhere? I mean, come on, live vacationing like in the middle, like if you're gonna vacation somewhere, you vacation by where there's nearby family, or you vacation
Right.
like to a tropical paradise. You don't vacation in the middle of bumfuck Montana, but so it's like that idea, like is this enough to get over my addiction, my devotion to my family? And it almost is. And you
Mhm.
can just feel it. You can just feel it, like, oh no, come on. You just need to make that little step. You don't want to just say, oh, I'll just go check inside, because that's that person saying, I'll just have one drink, it'll be harmless.
Yeah.
I'll just have one more. It's like that person having that one last fix before they head off to rehab, And no, it doesn't work like that. It's got to be a clean slate. And, I don't think that was intentional, but you can really see this movie as being a metaphor for that.
Especially for the mom character.
Oh, yeah, she gets obsessed.
She gets seduced by the music box. Which I thought was actually pretty interesting. She opens it up, and all of a sudden, everything becomes clear to her. And I really enjoyed. I thought they handled it well. And I'm. Oh, how'd you think, Scott? Where with the subtlety of the house coming alive, which that's the plot of the story, but you're watching it, and suddenly things seem a little brighter in that, and they kind of hint at it, but then they just move along. But it's a little subtle, yet not, on how this house is coming back alive, isn't it?
Well,
At first.
and they even say that line in the beginning. Oh, the house comes alive in the summer.
Yeah.
The and the thing about this is, now I criticized the film earlier for having a lack of subtlety in a lot of things. Paul, I know you were and everything we're talking about the music. I thought the music was a bit too bombastic in a lot of spots. Like it was like really just nailing it home. I'm like, okay, you know what? If you scaled that back a bit, there's a lot that really nails you over the head. But one of the more subtler points is that central theme of the house coming to life, and you don't know for the longest time how much is the workings of the mother, like manually scrubbing and cleaning and taking care of the place, and how much of this is just happening. Going back again to Cole's Christine analogy, and for the record, Stephen King loves this movie, and he wrote it. Oh yes, I didn't
know that. Holy shit.
I want to say he does. I want to say that he mentioned it in Danse Macabre, the book, his Danse Macabre.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong, but I believe he does like this movie a lot, and he did write Christine afterwards. But
he did, yes, he did.
There is a parallel. Like, for instance, if you in the in John Carpenter's movie of Christine, you actually see the car rebuild itself in that great scene where he just says, show me. In the book, if you read the book, it's more of the friend looking and finding the car in the garage and realizing that the way this car has been restored, there's no way his friend could have done that himself.
Yeah. Well,
it's much more suggested, and this is a kind of a thing where I was thinking, like, you don't know how much is Karen Black and how much is the house itself. Sorry, Cole, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say that scene in Christine that you mentioned was a reshoot anyway. It was never meant to be in the movie. They did that last minute. John Carpenter kind of panicked a little bit, I think, and he's like, no, you know what? We've got to have another layer of sexuality with the car, which is the whole show me, like, your girlfriend undressing or something. And they had the car kind of rebuild itself. And if you look, it's almost, the car, as the car inflates outward, it is kind of sexual. Anyways, that's neither.
No wonder that's my favorite scene. It's just how I roll, people.
You are right. By the way, you are right, Scott. According to trivia, Burnt Offerings is one of Stephen King's favorite horror films.
Hey,
Wow.
I wanted to say I heard
Wow.
him right. I heard him talk about it in Danse Macabre. I wasn't positive though.
And when you mentioned that, and you think about the film, you're like, "Holy crap!" Yeah, he borrowed a good. You could see the influences from this film in some of his, especially his earlier work. Another interesting trivia bit, and I thought I recognized it the minute I saw the house because this was my first viewing, but I just blew through the Phantasm.
Yep.
And that house is the same house that was used in the first Phantasm for the funeral home. I'm watching it going,
Holy shit.
I know this house.
Oh yeah, it's the
I
same
know
one.
this house.
And it was the thing, there's just a little quick humorous aside to that. Yeah, it's the same house. And here's the thing: is that I was going through the Phantasm movies at the beginning of the month too, and I actually went through it before I saw Burnt Offerings, like by a couple days. And I was checking the trivia, and I'm like, I know every time I see Phantasm, I've seen that house before. And people were saying, oh, it was in Burnt Offerings, still hadn't seen it. View to a Kill, no, that's not it either. Oh, it was also the girl school in Little Girl in the 1978 porno film Little Girls Blue. I'm like, that's it, it's Little Girls Blue School, and people were laughing at that when I posted it. And then almost because I can't just know when to shut up, I accentuated my point by uploading screen grabs from the movie. It's just look, see, there they are. and soccer practice right outside.
And that is why we love having Scott on the show, because he's a warehouse of knowledge, and if anything, he's a warehouse of porn knowledge. But
we all have to have our calling.
We do have a calling, and that is yours. But this film, I just love. One of the things, and I know it's a get off my lawn moment, but I was watching this, and I'm like, this is a horror film, and Paul, we just got done watching a whole bunch at a festival, but see if you agree with me. If you did a film exactly like this, and the pacing's fine for me because I enjoy classic films, I would think people would get bored today, I think, with this film if you tried to release it to the theater, wouldn't you think?
Oh, yes, definitely. It was probably, I would say, 40 minutes too long for modern audiences.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and as we've mentioned, it is paced, but it is a lot of setup and sort of rolling along slowly. And I kind of miss these horror films. I mean, we still get them peppered throughout, but we don't nearly get movies like this. And this is a little more of a standard as far as, not hugely action-packed, but wouldn't you say, Scott, this... For the time, that was a little bit more of the way this film was handled.
It's very deliberately paced. A film that this made me want to watch. I actually broke out the Blu-ray. Still need to watch it again. It made me want to watch Rosemary's Baby again. It kind of gave me that kind of same sense of pacing, which is also a rather long film. I do not agree. Respectfully, I disagree. I don't think that it would have trouble being released today. I think that it would have trouble getting made. I think that you would have to be one of those movies that people had to fight tooth and nail for, but I think that I think it could be made. I think it could be released, and even though a lot of not to paint with too broad a brush, a lot of younger audiences they might be looking for something more slapdash, might be kind of taken aback by the slow pacing. I think of films like The Others, or earlier this year, The Witch, and I think that even though it is unfortunately very rare, there is a place for deliberately paced horror films. It's just actually getting them out there to people is really hard because, let's face it, every film has to go through about 50 different layers of suits who, when they see a film, have nothing in mind except for box office potential. It's and some kind of films almost break that. For instance, The Witch did very, very well. I mentioned The Others, which is actually kind of an older film at this point, but came out this century at least, and that did very, very well. And but getting it out there was hard,
Yeah.
and it's just if you can get it out there, I think there will be an audience for it.
Mhm.
And I think that if they could get this movie out there, which I don't think they'd have that much trouble doing, it doesn't look like it would even cost that much to make today.
No, I was thinking if you look at remakes, this probably would be a reasonably priced remake if you really wanted to do it.
Oh yeah, I mean, even if you threw all the bells and whistles into it, provided you didn't hire somebody who was like an exorbitantly priced actor, I mean,
Yeah.
you could get it done for well under $10 million, even with like big studio money. I know lots of people who could probably get it done for $1 million, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that there would be an audience. I mean, it would find its audience. It just wouldn't be your typical horror audience, and I think that's why it would still stand out today.
Sure. I can see that. What about you, Cole? What do you think? You think modern audiences would be bored by it, or do you side more with Scott saying that there is an audience out there for it? It would just be the challenge of getting it out there.
Well, I think Scott is absolutely right on so many levels, but in terms of like what this film accomplishes, in terms of like recent films I've seen, and again, this goes along with what do you consider out there, but there's a movie called The Invitation and another movie called The Ones Below that neither of them could have been filmed for more than $2 million. I'm not sure what the budgets are. Look them up. These are phenomenal films that have followings that are very similarly themed to this. Very slow, brilliant movies. I mean, Scott mentioned Rosemary's Baby. The Ones Below, to me, is, like a modern Rosemary's Baby. I mean, it's almost that good. So these films are out there, and they're even on Netflix. I mean, I think The Ones Below is, I'm pretty sure you can watch it right now. I'm not sure where Sandy and I came across that, but these films are out there. But the film Scott mentioned, like The Others, I mean, that's a huge release. Could this movie get that release? I think Scott might be right. That might be extremely hard, but my experience is, depending on the relationship between the script and what hands it falls into, I mean, you can get anything made, but now who's gonna watch it? That's just been my experience. I've made 5 movies. How do you get them out there?
Right.
It's interesting.
Well, it's funny because I was listening recently to Andrew Shearer's podcast, the most recent one, where he was doing a review about from Under the Shadow and a couple other indie films, and he did make a point in that podcast, which if you haven't checked it out, check out the Cinephile podcast, awesome podcast by Mr. Shearer. He pointed out that this year is a little odd, and even 2015 we started to see it, where there is a surgence of films similar to Burnt Offerings, which we're linking it back to here. These different type of indie, slower burn type of different films that we're not used to seeing getting actually wide release. So something like Burnt Offerings, now that you mention it, with the right cast, you would probably need the right cast for it. You could probably get this out to a lot of people and hopefully fill some seats, because The Witch is a perfect equivalent to this, because it felt a lot of ways as far as pacing and tone.
Absolutely.
Similar. Burnt Offerings definitely has that feeling where you don't have really your jump scares, but there's atmosphere, and it's creepy, and it just gets more creepy as it moves along, and you just feel so bad for the little boy. I mean, Paul, did you feel real bad for David, played by Lee Montgomery? This kid just gets put through the ringer, doesn't he?
He really does. I mean, he gets basically drowned twice in the film, and then his end with the chimney is it's very, very, and he almost gets killed by the gas, the heater.
Right.
So,
where his aunt accidentally, played by Betty Davis, who I will say is the biggest surprise casting in this film. I'm going, Wait, did that just say Betty Davis? And sure enough, it's Betty Davis's Aunt Elizabeth.
She
Who,
she was in some later movies like this, and I don't really like Betty Davis that much. I know that's kind of blasphemous to say because she's supposed to be one of the greatest actresses. She's always rubbed me the wrong way. I actually liked her in this one, so sorry. Go ahead.
No, I did. I think it's the part that they wrote for her, though. She was having fun with this part, and then you get to the part where the house is sucking her energy, so to speak. And I thought she sold that well.
I think what also added too was she apparently had a really bad relationship with Karen Black in the filming of this. She
really?
felt that Karen Black wasn't giving her enough respect, and so they didn't really like each other. But that was actually pretty good in the film because there's that scene where they are fighting, and it actually looks genuine that they don't like each other.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
You probably had a little bit of art imitating life right there.
Wow.
But what I thought, and I want to get your all three of your thoughts on this. So we got this supernatural thing going on, the house sucking their essences, so to speak. We got the subtlety going on, the people going crazy. What I liked is there's not a full explanation for everything, namely the father's flashbacks. Scott, what did you think about those scenes? Did you like the fact that we really don't get a full explanation of why that creepy chauffeur is creepy?
What a great thing to put in here. And I've not read the book of this. I did a little bit of reading about the movie beforehand. I glanced at Wikipedia and IMDb. Okay, don't give me too much credit. Making it sound like I'm like a great researcher. Like bullshit. No, but I did a little. But I glanced at these things, and apparently that was an edition by Dan Curtis.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think he would have had a chance to add this beforehand. I mean, the guy was like the brainchild behind Dark Shadows. He had done the Tales of Terror trilogy of terror, and Dead of Night and all that stuff. And you'd think he would have had a chance to do it, but that was something, I guess, from his childhood where he was at a funeral for like a family member, and he was really unsettled because there was a chauffeur that was laughing nearby, and that just hadn't affected him. Well, this character that comes up is just like this grinning, pale, gaunt chauffeur, and it is really creepy. I mean, I think it shows also that this house has the ability to get into your innermost thoughts and kind of exploit your weaknesses. It exploited, at one point it exploited Oliver Reed's loneliness. And his lack of, physical satisfaction. It exposed. I think that it tapped into Karen Black's need for purpose, should we say? And I think it kind of shows that it taps into your greatest weaknesses. And one of his greatest weaknesses is that he had a they wrote it into the character that Oliver Reed had this personal trauma about this character. And what really got me was the scene. And I know we're trying to be a little coy here, but this is called the spoiler room.
It's a spoiler room.
It's called the spoiler room, folks.
Go for it.
Was that I really thought, okay, he's seeing this. This is all in his head. And he's just reliving these things, and it's the atmosphere of the house making him relive these things. No, when the thing actually came through the door, and he's there with Betty Davis, and they're both freaking the fuck out. I'm like, oh my god, it's real! I couldn't believe it. I was like, I thought for sure that this thing was like in his head. That's the part that really got me. Is like, it's real. Oh god, man, it was really I think that there might have been the feeling that he needed to punch up certain things in because it was such a subtle psychological thing. And as I've said, it did subtlety well in the main focus, but it also kind of pummeled any subtlety and later other things. But I think that for the punch up, which I guess included the ending. I suppose the ending for the book is completely different from what I read on the web. But it's like, I think it was like one of those punch-ups, and I think it was like one of those, that's a really clever punch-up, because that could have played off as, oh, and here comes the bug monster from Mars or something, because they felt they needed to punch. No, this is a very eerie, spooky, effective set piece, and I really enjoyed that quite a bit.
Yeah, I enjoyed that too, and apparently, you're right. As far as the book goes, according to trivia online, apparently the director actually read this novel a few years earlier, and he didn't like the open-ended conclusion the novel had, and he thought to himself, he pitied anyone who would ever get tasked with making a film version of the book. So when he gets the opportunity to direct the movie of the book, he wrote a better ending that he liked, which is the one in the film, which I loved, which is the husband going through the window, which apparently the stuntman almost died on.
Oh wow!
Because according again to trivia, apparently the crew waiting below had to adjust the safety padding, and he almost missed the padding by a foot or so.
Oh, no.
He hit it, but it was like only a foot or so more, and he would have been splat. So,
my gosh.
Thus explaining the abrupt ending to the film. The end, question mark?
No, man. That stuff is scary. Anybody who's watched the 3-hour making of Rob Zombie's Halloween doc, and you see the raw footage of that stunt girl, she just goes off a little balcony onto some cardboard boxes and gets bent in half. I mean, what those people do to their bodies is phenomenal, and I'm glad he was okay, seriously. Yeah. What a great shot, though. Wow, that's awesome.
Oh, that was a fantastic shot of him flying through the window, and then him smashing with his face through the windshield. Paul, how'd you feel about that?
Well, can I just talk about the chauffeur a bit? Because
sure.
He's one of my favorite characters. That said, I wish he was actually removed from this film. That's why I said this film was a little bit too long. You could have taken out all references of him, and the story would have been nice and tight for me.
Sure.
But the chauffeur, I think, represents a character that's used in urban legends a lot, and it's called the ferryman. Essentially, it's a spirit like Charon, who essentially ferries the dead souls to the afterworld. And so that's why he's kind of representative of death. You see him showing up at the funeral. You see him going there, taking Betty Davis, essentially taking her from Reed's character.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And
that's a good point. Yeah.
And so that and that's just and the fact that he's a chauffeur just adds that extra thing. I'm driving you to your death.
He drives the bodies across the river Styx to their death. Basically.
And now that's the only way I can. That's the only way I can see that now. Yeah.
That's so right on, Paul. That's awesome, man.
Thank you for letting me put that in.
No, go ahead.
Awesome.
Yeah, sorry, man.
So what was your other question?
Well, now you just hit a whole other level.
Blew my mind.
Now I can't see. No, the ending though.
It's funny. That's funny though, because it's like that means like I know that half the people listening to this, because that just blew our mind, and it was such a great observation. I'm sure that half the people listening to this. Think if they're like huge fans of the movie, half of them are going to be like, "Whoa, no way," and half of them are going to be like, "Duh."
What, you guys didn't see that?
Shit,
what the hell?
Right? I mean, he's driving, for God's sake.
What are you, fucking blind?
Well, we had all just seen the movie for the first time.
Yes.
It's not like we're lifelong fans,
Yeah. Which I was kind of glad that this was kind of a first watch for many of us because
For you guys too, it was
Yep,
because I knew that I just didn't make it to it for all these years. I thought everybody else had seen it.
No, this was the first time I think for just about everyone. So
Yeah, man.
and I can see why people talk about it, definitely. But no, the original question though, Paul, is just that ending. Did it kind of shock you a bit that they went that graphic at the very end, considering how most of the film had been pretty bloodless?
Yeah, definitely. I think like everyone in this podcast has alluded to, is the pacing was just wonderful. In that's what I think they essentially left that all out so that the very end, that impact was the greatest that they could do for the film. And I think that's why they did it so graphically then, because it was like, wow. And you notice that right at the end, that's when everything starts to kick into higher gear, you know?
Yeah, it is. And I just like the look on Reed's face as well. So, and the film, I think Cole mentioned it as well. Cole, you said the cinematography of this film, would you say it really helped build the house as a character?
Oh, yes, Mark. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts about the movie. I really respect that because if you have a movie that takes place in one location predominantly, you have to let the audience know where they're at in that location. Same thing with a fight scene. You know, the best fight scenes give you a sense of where everybody's at. You know, a movie that has a slow build is no different. A movie like this could have very easily been boring to me. You know, I don't respect something just because it moves slow. That'd be idiotic. But the genius in this movie is you get to know the stairways, the doorways, the woodwork, you know, the exterior, and you get to just really live in it with these characters. I mean, even in the last moments of the film, the director or the cinematographer is still taking you through the paces of the same like corners in the same hallways. The wife, when she walks up into that little old lady's room at top, and then the husband follows her like 3 or 4 minutes later, it's the same shot. So you just know where you're at, you know, in the house, and that's important in creating the fear, especially when there's no digital ghosts popping their faces out of the walls or something, you know. But no, I really dig that, and it's easy to screw up. I did a movie, my first movie called Shadows of Sabanville, and I filmed the interiors in 3 different houses, and the sense of space is completely fucked. You know, granted, you know, I don't care. I did that movie when I was 24. It was an experimental thing, but I learned a lot. You know, you need to know where your audience is at in your set. It can't just be, oh, he goes up some stairway and goes into some room to the right, and we'll figure out the room to the right later. Not the way to do it. I think this director had a very clear sense of where he wanted his actors to move in this mansion and where everything was at, and it really helped you stay solidified in this narrative, you know?
Yeah, the cinematography helped and everything, and overall, it's one of those films where you're like, okay, yeah, everybody talks about how good it is. Okay, I'll watch it. And it, you know, you kind of got that bar high, but this, I think, met it for me quite a bit. I dug it. You could see how this influenced haunted house films after it for like years, including Amityville Horror.
Absolutely, yeah, man.
Well, I mean, and you know, I think it plays to. There's two, you know, and there's lots of different kinds of ways to do the same story. I mean, this is proof of it because it adds, like I said, it added a new spin. But I mean, like, you know, there's the great like jump out and boo haunted house movies like Legend of Hell House, fantastic movie. My favorite haunted house movie of all time, or House on Haunted Hill, you know, another great jump out and say boo film. My favorite haunted house film of all time was The Haunting, the original.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
the original Haunting. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, about the best example of psychological horror you can imagine. And that thing, again, the house, as Cole points out, becomes a. Well, I think you pointed out, Mark, that becomes a character, and as Cole pointed out, you know, you get really a sense of everything in that place, and you know, it becomes so organic, and you see people go through the paces, and Another thing is that as the atmosphere of this place is wearing on the people in Haunting and like in Burnt Offerings, as it's wearing on the people, seeing these people go through these corridors over and over again and everything like that, and there's not just a simple like jump cut to the next sequence. Okay, now they just want to cross the house. You feel it wearing on them with the audience. The audience is wearing on them as well, and I think that is I think that both Cole and Mark and everybody here actually is not to leave you out there, Paul. No, everybody here. What am I saying? It just everything kind of in this place is designed so that you will it'll have some of the same psychological effects as it's having on this family.
Right.
And it kind of puts you in there with the characters that a lot of films, it's not that they don't care to do it, I think they don't realize the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this film did, and I think that's I think it's why we're still talking about it 40 years later,
Well, yeah. I mean, when the character goes up the staircase and then goes up to the next staircase to get to the, old lady's bedroom, you're following them up the staircase. It's not like he went up the staircase and, oh, boom, he's at the top. You kind of get where they're at in the house, and you feel like you're going up those stairs with the character. So I think that connects you a little more, too, than they start up the staircase and, oh, boom, we're at the top now.
Yeah.
I mean, actually thinking about it, too, like when characters come in the room, most of the time we see them come into the room. We don't just see them, oh, here we are in the room, at least in the beginning. So, you get that spatial relationship, and I think that really helps connect you and put you in the house with the characters, which is really important for a film like this, because this is all on the performances of the people. You don't have a whole lot of special effects, so it's the people and the editing and the direction that make a film like this still compelling and keep you interested in watching and what's going to happen. And I think it hits on most of the cylinders on that. So I think we're going to wrap it up here. We've talked quite a bit about this film. And, guys, we'll go down the list here real quick and just get your final thoughts on Burnt Offerings. And it's a 40-year-old movie, but who would you recommend it to? And, Paul, we'll start with you.
Any horror fan would enjoy it. I think that if you prefer supernatural horror, this would be a great film for you.
Right. Not a lot of gore, not a lot of jump scares, but still atmospheric horror, which, when done well, can be very effective. So I agree. Scott, how about you?
It's very good, and like I said, I've had little issues. I thought the bombastic music was a bit too much, but I loved the bits where it handled subtlety well, which is, again, why I thought, oh, man, this would be like insanely incredible, like with a little bit more artsiness behind the lens there, but because there's got such great things something I didn't touch on really quickly was that when the family is starting to have problems in the house, it's all plausible in the film because none of it can be initially attributed to the house or the change of scenery. It's like, no, they've had these issues. It's only like later on that you start to think, like, no, the house has something to do with this. It's not just something that was there all by itself. I mean, there's so many clever little bits to it. It's got a great cast. Oliver Reed's I love Oliver Reed. He's fantastic. He was pickled most of the time, but he was always such a great. But he was always like one of the greatest actors. I loved him. And he's
to get more British as the film went along, though. Seriously,
I think he was like, oh, fuck it, here's my accent. But, I love Oliver Reed, and I think it really is one of those great moody films. You want to call it a haunted house film, but that kind of only really scratches the surface. It's so different from most films of its type that it's kind of exists on its own.
Right.
I like it a lot. Yeah.
It does. It does kind of exist on its own and stands out a bit there. Cole, how about you? Final thoughts and who you recommend it to?
Yeah, I like Paul said, just about any horror fan. Obviously, it's got a 2 hour running time, and there's not a whole lot of gore. So, just keep that in mind for better or worse. But it's surprising to me, and it hasn't even really sunk in yet because the credits rolled. I took a half hour, drank a glass of wine, and did the show. But I'm realizing how many movies were influenced by this sucker. I mean, this thing is strikingly influential. So yeah, I mean that's what I have. I loved it. I'm kind of regretting I spent $3 on Amazon to rent it for 2 days. I wish I would have just bought it, because it's good. It's really good.
Yeah, it's a solid film. It's one that doesn't have a whole lot of cultural references, so I think it helps keep it a little bit timeless.
Good point.
Even the clothing isn't that, period setting. I mean, the car is a little, but if you look at it, you watch it. If you cleaned it up and watched it today, you could buy into it. So it keeps it a little timeless. So I think people could connect to it more. And for me, I always had a theory, and I'll wrap it up real quick. But I always have this theory that houses that are abandoned seem to suddenly run down really quickly, but those that have people in it, even the beat up house, seems to still thrive and not break down as quick. So watching a film like this where it's a house that gets rejuvenated by people in it, only these people got to get hurt, I kind of dug that because I'm like, yeah, I always kind of thought that a house, it kind of survives as long as there's people in it. And if there's people aren't in it, it seems to, the time seems to speed up on it. So I dug it. Yeah, Burnt Offerings, I'd recommend it to anyone. I mean, especially for this time period we've talked about some of the more disturbing horror films that have come out. I mean, you really don't have any severe elements until the end, nudity or anything like that. A little bit of a flash from Karen Black, but it's definitely all a lot safer and still creepy and fun. I think it's fun. It's great to watch these films like this, and you see these films, and you can see how these films impacted films later on that came after it, definitely. So there you go, folks. Burnt Offerings. We're going to go real quick down the line and let you know where people can find our guests when they're not yapping on here. So, Cole, where can people find you?
Right now, I am on Facebook. Shadows and Lovers Productions is the name of my company, and my page, The Last Great Horror Movie, is the name of the film. The trailer is on YouTube. Just type in The Last Great Horror Movie 2016 official trailer in any search engine except for Yahoo, and it should come up. We got
fucking Yahoo.
Yeah. We got a digital release in the very near future. We have a donation coming in that's going to give us the final push to get it, get captions and all that good stuff. But also, if you want to see me just dinking around with some cool fan stuff, my page Horror also on Facebook.
Awesome. And Paul?
Now that I'm going to get back into the full swing of things, you can find me basically everywhere at Forsaken Film Reviews.
Awesome. And Scotty D?
Well, you can check out the archives of all the old stuff I've written at movieocrity.com. Oh, yeah, there'll be new stuff there, too, but I've been saying that for months, so let's just... you know what? Keep going back, and one day you'll get a nice surprise. But yeah, movieocrity.com, and then you can check out my web series at vimeo.com/channels/movieocrity.
Awesome. And you can find links, as always, to all these fine folks' stuff and everyone who's been on the Spoiler Room at specialmarkproductions.com, your one-stop shop for all your Movie Man needs. We appreciate you joining us on this discussion of Burnt Offerings. Hope you have a great Halloween. And until next time, remember, in the Spoiler Room, the conversation is fresh, but we do spoil the movies. Say goodnight, gentlemen.
Good night,
Good night,
gentlemen.
Good
gentlemen.
night, fans.